That night, the rain didn't just fall, it wept. The fortress gates, built from centuries of bloodshed and silence, had never witnessed anything like this. Two beating hearts, fragile and impossibly human, abandoned where only death was meant to enter. The guards stood frozen, their immortal instincts screaming danger, but their eyes betraying something else, something they thought they'd forgotten. When the vampire king appeared in the storm, no one dared breathe, because in his hands, cradled against armor stained with ancient wars, were the children of the man he'd sworn to destroy. The rain had been falling for 3 days. It wasn't unusual for storms to last in northern mountains where Valencer's fortress stood, a monument carved from black stone and centuries of conquest. But this rain felt different. It carried weight, memory, as if the sky itself were mourning something that hadn't yet happened. Valencer stood at the highest tower, his silhouette sharp against the lightning that split the darkness. His silver eyes, cold, ancient, unreadable, watched the valley below where villages huddled in fear. They always feared him. It was simpler that way. He'd ruled these lands for 600 years, built an empire from ash and betrayal, crushed rebellions with glance. Yet tonight, something gnawed at the edges of his immortal calm, a sensation he'd learned to distrust, anticipation. Behind him, Selene, his second-in-command, and the only creature who dared speak freely, approached with measured steps. Her dark hair was slicked with rain, her armor still steaming from patrol. "The eastern perimeter is clear," she reported, her voice steady. "No movement from Kael's territories. Not even scouts." Valencer didn't turn. "That's what concerns me." Kael, the name alone tasted like poison in history. Once a brother in arms. Once the only being Valencer had trusted. Now the leader of the resistance, the faction of vampire purists who believed immortality belonged only to those born into darkness, not those turned by choice. Their war had raged for 2 centuries. A conflict born not from territory or power, but from philosophy, from betrayal so profound it had split their kind in two. "He's planning something," Valencer murmured, his fingers tracing the stone parapet. Silence is Kael's loudest weapon. Selene moved closer, her own silver eyes reflecting the storm. "The scouts report villages being evacuated, families fleeing south. They're terrified, but not of us this time." "Of what?" "They don't know. Only that Kael's forces have been moving at night, taking nothing, killing no one, just watching." Valencer's jaw tightened. Kael was meticulous. Every action carried layers of intention. If he was evacuating civilians, it meant he was preparing for something catastrophic, something that required witnesses removed. The king turned finally, his presence filling the space like gravity. "Double the watch. I want eyes on every." The alarm bells shattered the night, not the deep, resonant gongs that signaled attack. These were different, frantic, discordant, the sound of confusion rather than invasion. Valencer moved before thought, his form blurring through corridors and down ancient staircases carved from the mountain itself. The main gates came into view, and there, standing in the pouring rain, were his guards, immortal warriors who'd faced armies without flinching, frozen like statues, their weapons lowered, their faces masked the shock. "What is it?" Valencer's voice cut through the storm. No one answered. They simply stepped aside. At the base of the massive iron gates, illuminated by torchlight struggling against the rain, was a basket. Valencer descended the final step slowly, his boots splashing through pooling water. The basket was simple, woven reed, the kind human farmers use for harvest. But inside, wrapped in soaked linen that had once been white, were 2 infants. They were crying. The sound was so foreign, so achingly mortal, that for a moment Valencer simply stared. In 6 centuries, he'd heard every kind of scream, battle cries, death rattles, pleas for mercy. But this raw, helpless wailing struck something dormant in his chest. He knelt, his hand hovering over the basket as rain plastered his dark hair to his face. The twins couldn't have been more than a few months old, their skin flushed with cold, tiny fists clenched, eyes squeezed shut against a world that had abandoned them. "My lord," one guard whispered, his voice hoarse. There's a seal. Valencer's eyes found it then, a small pendant tucked between the children, hanging from a silver chain. His blood went cold, not from fear, but from recognition, so sharp it felt like a blade between his ribs. The seal of House Escharon, Chaol's house. Thunder rolled across the mountains, and in that moment, everything Valencer had built, every strategy, every carefully maintained alliance, every rule he'd enforced to keep his kingdom stable, trembled on the edge of collapse. "Check them for curses," Selene commanded, already moving forward with 2 medics. "Hexes, poisons, anything—" "Stop." Valencer's voice was quiet, but it froze everyone in place. He reached down his hands that had ended thousands of lives, sliding beneath the twins with impossible gentleness. They were so small, so impossibly fragile. He could feel their heartbeats, rapid and fierce, fighting to stay warm. He lifted them against his chest, and something extraordinary happened. They stopped crying. The sudden silence was more shocking than their wails had been. The infants nestled against his armor, their tiny bodies relaxing as if they found something they'd been searching for. One of them, a girl, he realized, with wispy dark hair, made a small sound of contentment. Selene stared. How is that possible? Valencer didn't answer. He was looking at their faces now, really looking, and the truth settled over him like a shroud. They had Chaol's eyes, that distinctive silver gray that marked House Escharon bloodline, but their features were softer, rounder. Human. They're half-bloods, he said quietly. The implications crashed through the assembled guards like a wave. Half-bloods were rare, the result of a vampire and human union. In Chaol's purest philosophy, they were abominations, evidence of weakness, of contamination, which meant Chaol had broken his own most sacred law. "This is a trap," Selene hissed, moving closer. "It has to be. Chaol wants you to take them, to expose compassion, to give him grounds to unite the purest factions against you. My lord, if you bring those children inside, I know what it means. Then you know you can't." "I said I know." Valencer's eyes lifted, meeting hers with an intensity that made even Selene step back. "Prepare the eastern wing. Private quarters. Medical station. Guards I trust with my life." "My lord." "That's an order." The rain continued its relentless assault as Valencer turned, carrying the twins toward the gates. Behind him, he could feel the stares of his own people, some confused, some horrified, some calculating what this meant for their carefully balanced world. He didn't care. As he crossed the threshold into his fortress, the massive gates groaning shut behind him. One of the twins opened her eyes. Silver gray and impossibly aware for an infant, she looked at him, not with fear or innocence, but with something that felt almost like recognition. And in that moment, Valencer understood. This wasn't just a trap or a political maneuver. This was Chaol's final message. "I have broken myself in ways you cannot imagine, and now you must choose. Become a monster I always said you were, or save the children of the enemy who destroyed you." Valencer's grip tightened infinitesimally. His voice, when he spoke, was barely a whisper, but it carried the weight of an oath that would reshape kingdoms. "From now on," he said, more to himself than the sleeping children, "you're mine." The storm raged on, but inside the Black Fortress, in a room being hastily prepared by servants who didn't understand what they were preparing for, 2 heartbeats continued their steady rhythm, and the Vampire King, for the first time in 600 years, felt the ghost of something he'd thought long dead. Fear. 3 weeks passed like a hell breath. The eastern wing had been transformed into something the fortress had never contained, a nursery. Tapestries depicting ancient battles were replaced with softer fabrics. Windows that had been sealed for decades were opened to let in pale winter sunlight, a concession that made the vampire staff uncomfortable but necessary for the half-human children. Valencer stood in the doorway now, watching as morning light spilled across the room in golden streams. The twins were awake, lying in their shared cradle, an ornate thing carved from white oak that Selene had somehow procured from the human townships. The girl was cooing softly, her tiny hand reaching for dust motes dancing in the sunbeam. The boy was quieter, his silver eyes tracking movement with unsettling focus. For an infant, they're growing faster than they should, came a voice behind him. Valencer didn't turn. He recognized the speaker, Mira, the fortress's healer, a vampire who'd been turned during the Renaissance and still carried the accent of Florentine nobility. She approached with the careful grace of someone who'd learned not to startle ancient predators. How much faster? At this rate, they'll be walking within 2 months, speaking within 4. She paused, her dark eyes troubled. My lord, their blood, it's changing. The vampire heritage is asserting itself faster than any half-blood case I've studied. Whatever Kael's lineage carries, it's dominant. Valencer absorbed this in silence. He'd been spending hours here each night, watching the twins sleep, searching their small faces for answers to questions he didn't want to ask. Who was their mother? Why had Kael, who'd built his entire rebellion on purity, created these children? And why, after hiding them for months, had he sent them here? The boy, Mira continued, moving closer to the cradle. He doesn't cry, not once since he arrived. He watches everything, processes everything. It's unnatural, even for us. As if responding to being discussed, the boy turned his head, his gaze locking onto Valencer with that same disturbing awareness. For a moment, king and infant simply stared at each other across the divide of 6 centuries and a few yards of sunlit floor. Then the girl laughed. It was such a pure, delighted sound that both vampires froze. She'd managed to catch a dust mote in her palm and was examining it with the fascination only a child could muster for something so simple. When it escaped, she laughed again, the sound echoing off stone walls that had never heard such innocence. Something shifted in Valencer's chest. They need names, he said quietly. Mira blinked. My lord, are you certain? Naming them makes it permanent. Right now, they're still Kael's children. A bargaining chip, perhaps, or a mystery to solve. But if you name them... Isla! Valencer moved forward, his hand hovering over the girl, for the light, and Draven for the shadow. His fingers brushed the boy's forehead with impossible gentleness. They're already permanent, Mira, the moment I carried them through those gates. The healer was quiet for a long moment. The council is demanding an audience. Let them demand. They've been patient, my lord, but patience has limits. Lord Theron is threatening to invoke the old codes. He claims harboring the enemy's bloodline as grounds for... For what? Valencer's voice dropped to a dangerous calm. Challenging me? Let him try. He's gathering support. Others are listening. They say you've grown soft, that the great Valencer, who once raised entire cities, now plays nursemaid to his enemy's spawn. Myra's voice was careful, but her words carried warning. They're calling for a tribunal. Valencer finally turned, his silver eyes catching the morning light in a way that made him seem almost luminous. Then we'll give them one. Tonight, Great Hall, let every voice that has doubts come forward. And if they vote against you... A cold smile touched his lips. They won't. But even as he said it, doubt coiled in his gut. He'd ruled through strength, through fear, through the careful balance of power and terror. This, protecting 2 infants who by all logic should be his enemies, was weakness. And in the world of immortals, weakness was blood in the water. The great hall had been built to intimidate. Vaulted ceilings disappeared into shadow. Pillars of black marble rose, like the bones of ancient giants. At the far end, elevated on a dais carved from a single piece of obsidian, sat Valencer's throne, empty now, as he stood before his assembled court like a defendant rather than a king. 300 vampires filled the space, lords and ladies of houses old and new, warriors who'd fought beside him for centuries, scholars who'd advised him through wars and peace. All of them watching with eyes that gleamed in the torchlight, like predators deciding if the hunt was worth the risk. Lord Theron stood at the center of the opposition, a vampire of pure bloodline, turned during the height of Rome, his face angular and sharp as broken glass. His voice carried the weight of aristocracy and absolute certainty. 600 years, he began, his words echoing through the hall. 600 years, King Valencer has led us, build us into the most powerful force in the known world, crush those who would see us weakened or destroyed. And in all that time, we've trusted his judgment without question. He paused, letting the silence build. Until now, murmurs rippled through the assembly. Valencer stood perfectly still, his hands clasped behind his back, his expression unreadable. Beside him, Selene radiated controlled fury, her hand resting on her sword hilt. 3 weeks ago, Theron continued, our king brought enemy children into our home. Not prisoners, not hostages, children he claims to protect. Half-bloods bearing the seal of Kael Ashrin, the very vampire who spent 2 centuries trying to destroy everything we built. More murmurs, louder now. And what has this act of compassion gained us? Theron's voice dripped with disdain. 3 of our allied houses have broken treaties. The human townships are in panic, spreading rumors that the vampire king has gone mad. Kael's forces have doubled their raids along our borders, all because our king has chosen to play father to the spawn of our greatest enemy. Are you finished? Valencer's voice cut through the growing chaos like a blade through silk. The hall fell silent. He moved forward slowly, descending from the platform where he'd been standing, walking among his people like a wolf among nervous deer. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, but it carried to every corner of the vast space. You speak of strength, of tradition, of the purity that's kept us powerful. He stopped, turning to face Theron directly. Tell me, Lord Theron, when did we become so afraid of 2 infants that we need a tribunal to decide their fate? Theron's jaw tightened. It's not fear. It's strategy. It's fear. Valencer's eyes swept the assembly. I can smell it on all of you. Not fear of the children. Fear of what it means that I chose to save them. Fear that perhaps the monster you followed for 6 centuries might have something you thought he'd killed long ago. And what is that? Another voice called out. Lady Seraphine, ancient and cunning, her French accent still sharp after 400 years. A conscience. The word fell like a stone into still water. Ripples of shock, confusion, and something almost like relief spread through the crowd. Valencer continued, his voice gaining strength. Yes, those children are Kael's blood. Yes, protecting them makes us vulnerable. But let me ask you something. What would you have had me do? Kill them? Leave them to die in the rain? They're half-bloods, Theron spat. Abominations by Kael's own definition. He sent them here as a message, as manipulation. He sent them here because he knew I would save them. Valencer's voice was steel wrapped in velvet. Because despite everything between us, despite 2 centuries of war, Kael knows one thing about me that apparently all of you have forgotten. He turned, his gaze sweeping across 300 immortal faces. I keep my oaths. Silence. 600 years ago, when I was human, yes, I was human once, though some of you seem to have forgotten that fact. I swore an oath, not to power, not to domination, but to protect those who cannot protect themselves. It's why I agreed to be turned, why I built this kingdom, why I fought every war, crushed every rebellion, made every impossible decision. His voice dropped, became intimate despite the vast hall. That oath didn't come with conditions. It didn't say, protect the innocent unless they're politically inconvenient. It didn't say, show mercy unless it makes you look weak. 2 infants were left at my gates, crying in the rain. In that moment, they weren't Kael's children or half-bloods or political pawns. They were defenseless. And I will not become so corrupted by immortality that I forget what it means to be more than a monster. Lady Seraphine was the first to speak into the following silence. And if Kael uses this against us, if those children are the key to destroying everything you built, Valencer met her eyes, then I'll deal with Kael the way I always have. But I won't do it by becoming him. Theron stepped forward, his voice sharp. This is madness. You're risking everything for her. For what I believe in. Valencer's voice hardened. And if that makes me unfit to rule in your eyes, Lord Theron, then challenge me. Invoke the old codes. Fight me for this throne and everything that comes with it. The hall went deathly still. An open challenge. In 600 years, Valencer had never been challenged successfully. Those who tried were now legends told to frighten children. Theron's hand moved his sword, but he didn't draw. The calculation was clear in his eyes. Courage warring with survival instinct. That's what I thought. Valencer turned away, addressing the entire assembly. The twins stay. They're under my protection, which means they're under protection of this kingdom. Any who have a problem with that can leave. No punishment, no pursuit. Walk away now, and we part without bloodshed. No one moved. But Valencer continued, his voice dropping to something almost gentle. If you stay, you accept this. All of it. The risk, the uncertainty, the possibility that choosing mercy over strategy might cost us everything. You accept it because you trust that I haven't survived 6 centuries by making foolish decisions. He paused at the base of his throne, one hand resting on the obsidian armrest. Or because you remember what we were supposed to be, not just predators, not just conquerors, but something better than the humans who feared the dark so much they invented us as their nightmares. The silence stretched. Then, slowly, Selene stepped forward. She knelt, her fist pressed to her chest in the old gesture of fealty. I stand with my king. One by one, others followed. Not all, not even most at first, but enough. Warriors he'd fought beside, advisors he'd trusted, even some who'd seemed aligned with Theron moments before. The Lord himself stood frozen, watching his coup dissolve like morning mist. Finally, his shoulders sagged in defeat. He knelt as well, though his eyes promised this wasn't over. Valencer climbed to his throne and sat, the gesture reclaiming power that had never truly been in question. But as he looked out over his court, diminished now, more uncertain than it had been in centuries, he felt no triumph, only the weight of a choice that would define everything to come. Later that night, after the hall had emptied and the fortress settled into uneasy sleep, Valencer returned to the nursery. Isla and Draven were awake, both sets of silver-gray eyes tracking his movement as he approached their cradle. The girl reached for him immediately, her tiny hands grasping. The boy simply watched, that unsettling awareness seeming to look straight through him. Valencer lifted Isla carefully, feeling the warmth of her against his chest. She made a small, contented sound, her hand tangling in the fabric of his shirt. "You have no idea what you've cost me," he murmured, though there was no anger in his voice. "What you'll continue to cost." Draven's eyes never blinked. "But I meant what I said. You're mine now, which means everything I am, everything I built, stand between you and whatever darkness your father has planned." A sound at the door made him turn. Mira stood there, her expression troubled. "My lord, our scouts just returned. Chaos forces have withdrawn from all border positions. Completely. It's as if they've vanished." Valencer's grip on Isla tightened slightly. He's seen the tribunal outcome. How is that possible? It just ended. Kale has always had eyes everywhere. He knows I've claimed them publicly now. Knows I divided my own court to protect them. Valencer looked down at the infant in his arms, at the boy still watching from the cradle. He got exactly what he wanted. Then this was a trap. No. Valencer's voice was quiet. It's something worse. It's a test. And I have no idea what passing or failing looks like. Thunder rumbled in the distance, another storm approaching. Isla stirred against his chest, her small hand pressing over where his heart once beat. And for the first time in 600 years, the vampire king stood in a room filled with light, holding life against the darkness, and wondered if mercy was truly strength, or the beginning of his downfall. Seasons turned like pages in an ancient book. Winter melted into spring, and spring burst into a summer that painted the northern valleys in colors Valencer had stopped noticing centuries ago. But now, walking through the fortress gardens with 2 small hands gripping his, he found himself seeing the world through new eyes. Isla was laughing, chasing butterflies with the single-minded determination of a toddler who'd only recently learned to run. Her dark hair caught the sunlight, creating a halo effect that made her look like something divine rather than the daughter of his enemy. She'd grown at the accelerated rate Mira predicted, now appearing roughly 3 years old despite only 8 months having passed since that rain-soaked night. Draven walked beside Valencer silently, his small hand in the king's, his silver eyes missing nothing. He'd spoken his first word at 2 months, full sentences at 3, and now carried himself with gravity that unsettled even veteran warriors. He rarely smiled, never cried, but occasionally looked at Valencer with something that might have been affection. "Papa, look." Isla's voice carried pure joy as she presented a crushed butterfly, already dead in her enthusiastic grip. The word still struck him every time. Papa. She'd started using it weeks ago, naturally, as if there had never been another option. Draven didn't use it. Didn't use any familial terms. But he stayed close, always within arm's reach of Valencer, his silent shadow. "You've killed it, little one," Valencer said gently, kneeling to examine the butterfly. "See? Too tight." Isla's face crumpled immediately, tears welling in those silver-gray eyes. "I didn't mean to." "I know." He brushed her dark hair back. "But things are fragile. Even when we care about them, we can break them if we're not careful." She nodded solemnly, then carefully placed the dead butterfly among the flowers. "So it can sleep?" Something in Valencer's chest tightened. He'd ended thousands of lives without hesitation, yet watching a child grieve a butterfly threatened to unmake him. Draven spoke then, his voice clear and oddly mature for his apparent age. "Everything dies eventually, even us." Both Valencer and Isla turned to him. The boy was staring at the butterfly with clinical interest. "We're half vampire," Draven continued calmly. "Mira says we'll live longer than humans, but not forever like you. We're in between. Not quite either thing." Draven. Valencer started, but the boy cut him off. "It's okay. I've been reading the books in your library. The ones about our kind. About what happens to half-bloods." His silver eyes lifted, meeting Valencer's without fear or doubt. "We're experiments. That's why Father made us. To see what happens when two halves try to make a whole." The casual way he said "father," referring to Chaol, not Valencer, sent a chill through the ancient vampire, because Draven was right. Chaol would have had a purpose. Nothing that vampire did was without layers of intention. Before Valencer could respond, Selene appeared at the garden entrance, her face grim. "My lord, we have a situation." The situation was a rider. He collapsed at the main gates just after dawn, his horse dead beneath him from exhaustion. Human, barely alive, clutching a sealed letter stained with blood and dirt. The fortress healers, both human and vampire, were working on him now, but the letter had been brought immediately to Valencer. He held it now, standing in his private chambers, the wax seal unbroken. Not Chaol's seal, something older. A symbol he hadn't seen in 3 centuries, a crown wrapped in thorns. The Southern Empire. "It's from Empress Lyria," Selene said quietly, standing by the window. "She hasn't contacted you since the Treaty of Ashenlands. What could she possibly want now?" Valencer broke the seal. The letter was brief, written in Lyria's elegant hand. "Valencer, the prophecy has begun. The children you protect are not the only ones. There are 4 others, scattered across the kingdoms, all born of vampire-human unions within the same month, all bearing the mark of the convergence. If you don't know what this means, consult the Oracle. If you do, then you understand what's coming. War isn't something we can choose anymore. It's already here. The only question is which side of the extinction we'll stand on. 3 nights from now, representatives from each kingdom will gather at the Nexus. Neutral ground. I expect you'll attend. Bring the children. They need to meet their counterparts before the world burns. For what it's worth, I'm sorry this choice fell to you. L. Valencer read it twice, then a 3rd time, before the implications fully settled. When they did, he had to grip the edge of his desk to steady himself. "My lord," Selene's voice was careful, "get Mira, and find me every text we have on the Convergence prophecy. Ancient dialects, all of them." The Convergence, Selene's face went pale. "That's a myth. A story vampires tell to frighten newly turned. It's not a myth." Valencer's voice was hollow. "I just didn't believe it would happen in my lifetime. No one did. It hasn't occurred in over 5,000 years. What is it?" He looked up at her, And Celine actually stepped back at the expression in his eyes. Not fear. Worse, resignation. The end of one world and the birth of another. The oracle lived in the deepest part of the fortress, in chambers that had been sealed when Valencer first claimed the mountain. She was older than him by millennia, a vampire so ancient that time itself seemed to bend around her, her form shifting between solid and shadow, as if she couldn't quite remember how to maintain physical shape. Valencer descended the spiral staircase alone, carrying a single candle. The children were above, under guard he trusted. This conversation wasn't for young ears, even ones as preternaturally aware as Draven's. The oracle's chamber was circular, carved from raw stone, the walls covered in script from languages dead before human civilization began. At the center, sitting in a chair that might have been wood or bone or something in between, was her. She looked like a young woman and an ancient crone simultaneously, her features flickering between the two as if viewed through water. When she spoke, her voice echoed from everywhere and nowhere. The father who is not a father, the king who protects his doom. You come seeking answers, but you already know the questions are wrong. Valencer set the candle down. The convergence. Tell me what I need to know. Need or want? Her smile was unsettling. Every 5,000 years, the universe balances its ledger. Vampires were never meant to exist, a glitch in the divine pattern. Too powerful, too immortal, too much. I know the theory. Then you know that the convergence children are the correction. Half vampire, half human, born within the same lunar cycle, bearing marks that identify them to forces beyond our understanding. She leaned forward, and for a moment her form solidified into something almost human. 7 children, 7 bloodlines. When they reach their awakening, somewhere between 5 and 10 years by human reckoning, they will become conduits. Conduits for what? For the choice. Will vampires continue to exist? Or will the universe reset the experiment, erase us from reality as if we never were? Her eyes, when visible, were white and empty. The children will decide. Not consciously, not with words, but through what they become, what they choose, how they love or hate or fear. Valencer felt cold despite immortal blood that couldn't truly chill. How does it happen? They'll be drawn together, compelled by instinct older than thought. And when they gather, all 7, all awakened, they'll create a nexus, a point where reality bends. In that moment, the universe will look at our kind through their eyes and judge. Judge what? Whether the experiment of vampirism has created something worth preserving, or whether it's time to end the anomaly. The oracle's form flickered. The children are innocent now, but they'll grow into their power, and power always reveals truth. If they become like us, predators, conquerors, monsters, the judgment will be extinction. But if they become something new, something that bridges the gap between mortal and immortal, she trailed off, leaving the possibility hanging. How do I protect them? Valencer's voice was raw. How do I ensure they... You can't. The oracle's laugh was like wind through empty halls. That's the point, Valencer. You, who controlled everything for 6 centuries, cannot control this. The children will become what they will become. Your role isn't to shape them. It's to keep them alive long enough to make the choice that ends or saves us all. And if I fail, then neither failure nor success will matter, because none of us will exist to remember it. Valencer emerged from the oracle's chamber as the sun set, painting the fortress in shades of blood and gold. He found Mira waiting at the top of the stairs, her expression grave. My lord, the twins! Something's happened. He was moving before she finished speaking, fear driving him faster than thought. The eastern wing, the nursery, guards posted but looking shaken and inside. Both children were unconscious, lying in their beds as if asleep. But their skin glowed faintly, a silvery light pulsing in rhythm with their heartbeats. On each of their foreheads, barely visible but growing clearer by the moment, was a mark, a crown wrapped in thorns. When did this start? Valencer's voice was deadly calm. An hour ago, they were playing, then suddenly collapsed. The marks appeared shortly after. My lord, I've tried every diagnostic, every remedy. They're not sick. Valencer moved Isla first, his hand hovering over her glowing forehead. The mark was warm to touch, almost alive. They're awakening, faster than the oracle predicted. Awakening to what? Before he could answer, Draven's eyes opened. Not slowly, not with confusion of waking from sleep, but instantly, zero to complete awareness. His silver eyes found Valencer and held. "The others are calling," the boy said, his voice echoing strangely. 6 voices, 6 heartbeats. "They want us to come home." "You are home." "No." Draven sat up, the glow intensifying. "Home is where all 7 gather. Home is the Nexus." His head tilted, bird-like. "You can feel it too, can't you? The pull, the universe reorganizing around us." Valencer could. A sensation like gravity shifting, like standing at the edge of a cliff and knowing the ground beneath was crumbling. Every instinct screamed danger, but beneath that was something else. Inevitability. Isla stirred then, her eyes opening to reveal the same silver glow as her brother. But where Draven was calm, she was distressed, tears streaming down her small face. "Papa, I'm scared. Something's changing inside me, and I don't understand it." He gathered her into his arms, feeling the unnatural warmth radiating from her small body. "I know, little one. I know." "Are we dying?" "No. You're becoming what you were always meant to be." He held her closer, his other hand reaching for Draven, pulling both children against him. "And I promise you, whatever that means, whatever happens, I won't let you face it alone." The mark on Isla's forehead pulsed, and for a moment Valencer could have sworn he saw something move beneath it, like shadows behind thin fabric, pressing to escape. Celine appeared in the doorway. "My lord, you need to see this." He followed her gaze to the window. Outside, visible even in the dying light, was something impossible. The sky was tearing, not metaphorically. Actual rifts in the fabric of reality, spreading like cracks in glass. Through them, glimpses of other places, forests that shouldn't exist, cities from civilizations long dead, and something that looked like stars bleeding into the void. "It's happening everywhere," Celine breathed. "Every kingdom is reporting the same thing. The world is coming apart at the seams." Valencer looked down at the children in his arms, both still glowing, both bearing marks that seemed to pulse in rhythm with the tearing sky. How long until the gathering at the Nexus? 3 nights. But my lord, traveling with them in this state. We don't have a choice. He stood, carefully keeping both children close. If we don't go, the convergence happens anyway. But without any chance of controlling the outcome, at least at the Nexus, surrounded by the others, maybe we can... Can what? Celine's voice cracked. "None of us understand what's happening. The Oracle spoke in riddles. For all we know, bringing them together accelerates the end. Then the end was always going to come." Valencer met her eyes. "But I'll be damned if I face it by abandoning these children to their fate. We go to the Nexus. We meet the others. And we find a way to survive what's coming." Isla's small voice muffled against his chest. "Will the other children be nice?" Despite everything, the tearing sky, the glowing marks, the weight of prophecy and doom, Valencer almost smiled. "I hope so, little one. I really do." But as he looked out at reality unraveling like cheap cloth, he knew hope was a fragile thing to carry into the end of the world. That night, while the children finally slept, the glow faded but the marks permanent, Valencer stood in his war room, staring at maps that suddenly meant nothing. Borders, kingdoms, centuries of strategy made irrelevant by forces beyond comprehension. A knock. Theron entered without waiting for permission, his face grave. "I was wrong," the old vampire said without preamble. "In the tribunal. I thought you'd grown weak, sentimental. But you saw this coming, didn't you? Not the specifics, perhaps, but the weight of it." "I saw children in the rain," Valencer replied quietly. "Everything else is consequence. The court will follow you, even those who doubted, because if the world's ending, they'd rather face it behind someone foolish enough to believe mercy matters." Theron's smile was bitter. "For what it's worth, I hope you're right. I hope love and protection and all those human virtues you've tried to preserve actually mean something when the universe passes judgment. And if they don't, then at least we'll die knowing we tried to be more than monsters. Theron moved to the window, watching the sky knit itself back together until the next rupture. The human villages are in panic. They think it's divine wrath. They're not entirely wrong. Evacuate them. Southern territories beyond the mountain range. If the Nexus becomes ground zero for whatever's coming, at least they'll have a chance. And us? Valencer turned, his silver eyes reflecting lamplight. We go to meet our fate, and we do it by protecting 7 children who may be the only thing standing between existence and oblivion. Thunder rolled across the mountains, natural this time, heralding another storm. In the eastern wing, Isla stirred in her sleep, her small hand reaching out as if grasping for something just beyond reach. And in the darkness between worlds, 6 other children with glowing marks opened their eyes simultaneously, all speaking the same word in different languages. Soon. The journey took 2 nights through landscapes that no longer obeyed natural law. They traveled in a convoy, Valencer, the twins, Selene, Mira, and 50 of his most trusted warriors. The roads shifted beneath them, sometimes stone, sometimes earth, sometimes something that looked like solidified starlight. Trees appeared where maps said there should be plains. Rivers flowed upward. The sun rose twice in one day, then didn't rise at all for 16 hours. Reality was preparing for convergence, rearranging itself around the 7 focal points traveling toward the Nexus. Isla handled it with the resilience of childhood, treating each impossibility as an adventure. "Look, Papa, that cloud looks like a dragon," she'd exclaim, pointing at something that definitely wasn't a cloud and might actually have been a dragon caught between dimensions. Draven remained silent, his silver eyes tracking phenomena that made even ancient vampires nervous. He'd stopped speaking entirely since the marks appeared, communicating only through glances and occasional nods. But he stayed close to Valencer, his small hand always finding his adoptive father's when reality bent too severely. He's aware of them now. Mira observed on the second night, riding beside Valencer's horse. The other 6, I can see it in his eyes, he's not just traveling to the Nexus. He's being pulled toward them like iron to a lodestone. Can you tell they're hostile? I don't think they know what they are yet. They're children, regardless of what cosmic purpose they serve. She paused. But they're guardians, that's a different question. Indeed, if all 7 children had vampire protectors, the Nexus would become a gathering of some of the most powerful immortals in existence, all of them desperate, all of them frightened, all of them capable of extraordinary violence if they perceived threat. A recipe for catastrophe. The Nexus itself appeared on the horizon as they crested a final hill. A valley that shouldn't exist, circular and perfectly flat, surrounded by standing stones older than vampire civilization. In the center was a structure that hurt to look at directly, something between a temple and a Terran space, its architecture following rules from other dimensions. And around it, 6 other groups were arriving. Valencer dismounted slowly, his eyes cataloging threats with the efficiency of 6 centuries of warfare. To the east, a contingent bearing the crimson banners of the Southern Empire. Empress Lyria herself had come, flanked by warriors whose armor seemed to absorb light. To the west, a smaller group moving with predatory grace that marked them as Kale's people. His breath caught. Kale was here. The vampire stood at the edge of his group, tall and severe, his silver-gray eyes, so similar to twins, fixed on Valencer with an expression that defied easy reading. Not quite hatred, not quite regret, something between recognition and resignation. "Papa, that man—" Isla's voice was small, uncertain. "Why does he feel like home?" Draven finished, speaking for the first time in days. "Because he's our blood father, the one who made us, the one who gave us away." Valencer's hand tightened on Draven's shoulder. "The one who trusted me to protect you." They moved forward, entering the valley proper. The other groups were doing the same, converging on the central structure like pieces on a cosmic game board. As they drew closer, Valencer could see the children. 7 of them, all bearing the crown and thorns mark glowing faintly on their foreheads, all appearing roughly the same age despite potentially being born weeks apart, all staring at each other with recognition that transcended memory or logic. The Southern Empire's child was a girl with dark skin and eyes like molten gold, held protectively by Empress Lyria. The northern clans had brought twin boys, brothers, both marked, both watching everything with feral intensity. The Eastern Syndicate's child was a girl with features that suggested Asian heritage, her silver mark contrasting sharply with her black hair. The Western Territories had a boy whose mark seemed to shimmer and shift. And Kale's group, Valencer's heart stopped. Kale had brought 3 children. Not 2, 3. The third was older, perhaps 5 in appearance, and the mark on her forehead was different. Not a crown and thorns, but a crown shattered. Her eyes were ancient despite her small frame, and when they met Valencer's, he understood. She was the firstborn, the prototype, the one Kale had created before perfecting the formula with Isla and Draven. Her name is Evangeline. Kale's voice carried across the distance. He moved forward, flanked by guards but making no aggressive moves. She's the reason I knew how to make the others viable. The reason I understood what was coming. You experimented on children. Valencer's voice was deadly quiet. I prepared them for the only role that matters. Kale's face was carved from stone and shadows. Do you think this is about you and me anymore, Valencer? About our war or our philosophies? The universe is deciding whether our species deserves to exist. These children are the jury. They're not weapons. They're both. Kale's silver eyes gleamed. Weapons and victims and judges and saviors. All at once. That's what makes them perfect. Before Valencer could respond, a sound filled the valley. Not quite music, not quite language, but something that resonated in the bones and blood. The standing stones began to glow, and the central structure pulsed with light that shouldn't exist in the visible spectrum. The convergence was beginning. The 7 children moved as one, pulled by instinct older than consciousness. Their guardians tried to hold them back, but it was like trying to hold water or starlight. Isla and Draven slipped from Valencer's grasp with apologetic looks, joining the others in a circle around the central structure. When they touched hands, all 7, a perfect ring of small fingers and glowing marks, the world stopped. Not metaphorically. Time itself froze. Every vampire, every guard, every creature in the valley became a statue mid-motion. Only Valencer and the other primary guardians remained mobile. He, Lyria, Kale, and 4 others he didn't recognize. 7 guardians for 7 children. It's showing us, Lyria breathed, her usual imperial composure shattered. Look. The structure at the center had become transparent, revealing something vast beyond it. Not a place, a process. The mechanism of reality itself, laid bare like an open book. And within it, they could see the history of vampires. The moment of first creation, an accident, a blood ritual gone wrong 5,000 years ago, creating something that should have died but didn't. The spread across continents, the wars with humans, the evolution from mindless predators to sophisticated civilizations. Thousands of years compressed into moments of crystalline clarity. But woven through it all was a thread of wrongness. Vampires consumed without giving back, took life without creating it, existed outside the natural cycle of birth, death, and renewal, an anomaly that grew larger with each passing century. The universe tried to correct us before, one of the other guardians said, a woman with Nordic features, guardian of the Northern Twins. Every plague that targeted vampires specifically, every holy relic that burned our flesh, those weren't divine punishment. They were the universe's immune system trying to eliminate the infection. But we survived, Kale added, his voice hollow. Adapted, became more resilient, which meant the next correction had to be more fundamental. Existential, Valencer finished, not just killing vampires. Erasing the possibility of vampires from reality's code. The children at the center began to glow brighter, their marks pulsing in synchronization. Through the structure, images shifted. A future where the children judge vampires unworthy. Reality folding back on itself. Every vampire that ever existed simply ceasing, not dying, unmade, as if they'd never been. Valencer saw himself in that future, or rather, the absence of himself. A world where his 6 centuries never happened, where the fortress was just a mountain, where Isla and Draven were never born because their father was never turned. Then another image, a future where the judgment fell differently. The children becoming bridges between mortal and immortal, creating something new. Vampires evolved beyond parasitism into symbiosis, a new species that gave back as much as it took, that died and was reborn, that fit into reality's pattern instead of existing outside it. Both futures waited, balanced on a blade's edge. How do we influence this? Lyria demanded. There has to be a way. There isn't. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, the oracle, or something like her, speaking through the structure itself. The children will judge based on what they've learned, what they've experienced, what they believe about the creatures who raised them. You cannot manipulate them now. You can only hope your choices before this moment were correct. Valencer's eyes found Isla in the circle. Her small face was serene, eyes closed, but tears streamed down her cheeks. She was seeing everything. Every massacre, every moment of cruelty, every vampire who treated humans as nothing more than food, but also every moment of protection, every vampire who'd chosen mercy, every instance of love existing where it shouldn't. They're experiencing all of it. Myra's voice came from behind him. She'd been frozen but somehow broke free. The entire history of our species, process of the moral framework of children who are both vampire and human. They'll judge us the way children judge their parents. Completely, fairly, and without the cynicism that lets adults rationalize evil. Then we're doomed, one of the Guardians said. Children see the world in absolutes. They won't understand the complexity, the necessity of survival. They'll understand love. Valencer spoke quietly, but every Guardian turned to him. They'll understand who protected them, who sacrificed for them, who chose their well-being over power or tradition or fear. His eyes met Kale's across the circle of children. Isn't that right? That's why you sent them to me. Not as a trap or a test, but because you knew I'd love them when you couldn't. Kale's face cracked. Centuries of controlled emotion splintering. I broke every oath I ever made to create them. Violated every principle of purity I'd fought for. Because the Oracle told me what was coming, and what was needed. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. But I couldn't love them, Valencer. I'd become too much of what I claimed to hate. Too much monster. Not enough. Whatever you still are. Human? Hope. Kale's smile was bitter and broken. You're 600 years old, and you still believe mercy matters. Still protect the weak. Still choose compassion when logic says choose power. I stopped being able to do that 3 centuries ago. So when Evangeline was born, and I saw what she could be, I knew she needed someone who still remembered how to be more than a predator. He gestured to the twins, still glowing in their circle. The second pair was insurance, and a message. If the universe was going to judge us through children, I wanted at least some of those children to know what it felt like to be loved unconditionally, not for what they could do or what power they represented, just loved. The structure pulsed, and the children began to speak in unison, not in any language that existed, but in pure meaning that bypassed language entirely. We have seen what you are. We have felt what you've done. We have judged what you could become. The valley held its breath. The verdict is, Isla opened her eyes first. She looked directly at Valencer, and her expression was ancient despite her small face. When she spoke, it was with her own voice but carrying weight that pressed against reality itself. Papa, why did you save us? The question hung in the frozen air. Every guardian, every warrior, every vampire in existence seemed to wait on his answer. Valencer knelt, bringing himself to her eye level. Because you needed saving. Because leaving you in the rain would have made me the monster I spent 6 centuries trying not to become. Even though we are enemies' children, you're not my enemy. You're children. That's all that matters. Even though protecting us cost you everything, he reached out, his hand trembling slightly as it cupped her small face. Especially then, because the only thing worth more than power or survival or victory is the belief that compassion isn't weakness. that choose and protect the helpless, even when it's stupid, even when it's dangerous, even when it costs everything, is what separates us from the mindless predators we could become. A tear slid down Isla's glowing cheek. You really believe that? With everything I am. She smiled then, small and sad and infinitely knowing. Then maybe there's hope for all of you. The 7 children raised their joined hands, and the structure exploded into light. When Valencer could see again, the valley had changed. The standing stones were gone. The structure was gone. The children stood in their circle, but they were different now, older, somehow, though only moments had passed. The marks on their foreheads had shifted from glowing silver to something that looked like starlight captured under skin. Time unfroze. The other vampires gasped, staggering as they regained mobility. The sky above was no longer tearing itself apart. Instead, it showed stars that had never existed before, constellations being born in real time. Draven spoke, his voice echoing with harmonics. The judgment has been rendered. Vampires will continue to exist. Relief flooded through the valley like a wave. But Evangeline continued, her shattered crown mark pulsing. Not as you were. The universe has accepted our testimony that your species can evolve beyond parasitism. So evolution is now mandatory. What does that mean? Lyria demanded. The Southern Empire's child answered, her golden eyes luminous. It means every vampire will feel what their prey feels. Empathy will no longer be optional. You'll experience the fear, the pain, the loss of every life you take. It means, the Eastern child added, that you'll age slowly, far slower than humans, but mortality is returning. You'll die naturally after roughly 5,000 years. It means, the Northern twins said in unison, that you can create life now. True progeny, born not turned. The ability to have children, without them being half-blood anomalies. It means, the Western child finished, that holy symbols and sunlight will no longer burn you. But human faith will. If enough people believe you're evil, you'll feel that judgment like fire in your veins. The implications crashed through the assembled vampires like an avalanche. Everything that had defined them for 5 millennia was changing. The fundamental rules of their existence being rewritten. And if we refuse? Kale's voice was hollow. If we fight this evolution? All 7 children turned to him with eyes that held the weight of cosmic judgment. Then the universe will revoke its mercy, they said as one. And the alternative is complete erasure. Not just of vampires alive now, but retroactively. Every vampire that ever existed will be unmade. This is not negotiation. This is the terms of your continued existence. Silence. Then, slowly, Valencer began to laugh. It started quiet, almost bitter, then grew into something genuine. Something that might have been relief or hysteria or the sound of 600 years of tension finally releasing. What's funny? Selene hissed. We were judged by children, he said, pulling Isla and Draven into an embrace. And they decided we deserved a second chance. Not because we were powerful or clever, or even because we fought for survival, but because some of us still remember how to love. He looked at Kale over the children's heads. You were right. This was never about our war or our philosophies. It was about whether anything we become in our immortality was worth saving. Kale's expression was unreadable. Then, slowly he approached, the warriors on both sides tensed, hands moving to weapons. But Kale simply knelt beside Valencer, his hand reaching out to touch Evangeline's hair, then Isla's, then Draven's. I would have failed this test, he said quietly. I'd become too much darkness, too much certainty that strength mattered more than compassion. That's why I needed you. Why I trusted you with my blood when I couldn't trust myself. They're not just your blood anymore, Valencer replied. They're ours. All 7 of them belong to all of us now. Children of the Convergence. Living proof that we can be more than we were. Around them, the other Guardians were reaching similar conclusions. Ancient enemies putting aside weapons. Rival houses acknowledging a threat greater than territorial disputes. Because 7 children had judged them all and found just enough worth saving to grant a second chance. But second chances came with conditions. The gathering at the Nexus lasted 3 more days. Treaties were drafted, new laws established. The 7 children, now bound together by cosmic purpose and shared judgment, would be raised collectively, moving between kingdoms, learning from all vampire cultures. They would be the bridge generation, the living symbols of what evolution meant. Valencer watched as Isla played with the other children, her laughter bright against a backdrop of heavy political negotiations. She returned to being just a child, the cosmic weight lifted. But occasionally, he'd catch her looking at him with those 2 knowing eyes, and he'd remember what she'd seen, what she'd judged, what she'd decided. On the final night, as the groups prepared to part, Cale approached one last time. "They'll spend the spring season with me," he said. "Not quite a question. Learning their heritage, understanding where they came from. And they'll return to me for summer," Valencer confirmed. "Learning what it means to protect rather than conquer. You think you can teach them that? After 6 centuries of war." "I think they've already taught me." Valencer's smile was slight. "That's what children do. They make us remember what we were before we became what we are." Cale was quiet for a long moment. "I hated you for 200 years. Built my entire purpose around destroying you. And now we're co-parents to the children who saved our species." Valencer's laugh was soft. "The universe has a sense of irony. Or justice." Cale extended his hand. Not a warrior's grip, but something gentler. "Thank you. For being what I couldn't. For loving them when I'd forgotten how." Valencer took the offer hand. "And thank you for trusting me with them. For believing mercy was worth more than pride." As they separated, Isla ran up, throwing her arms around Valencer's legs. "Papa, Evangeline says we're going to learn vampire history. Will you tell me stories too? About the human side? About what was like before?" He lifted her up, feeling the solid weight of her, the warmth that was returning now that the cosmic judgment had passed. "Every night, I'll tell you about humanity and compassion, and all the things that almost disappeared but didn't. Because you remembered? Because we remembered together." Draven approached more slowly, his expression thoughtful. "The empathy change, it's already starting. I can feel it. Every vampire here. They're beginning to sense each other's emotions. Fear, relief, hope. It's overwhelming them. Can you feel it too?" The boy nodded. "I feel your love. It's like warmth, like standing in sunlight, but from the inside out." He paused. "Is that what kept us alive? During the judgment? Your love being so strong that even when they saw all the terrible things vampires have done, they could still sense this." Valencer pulled him close, one arm around each twin. "I don't know. Maybe. But I do know that love is the only thing I have that time hasn't corrupted. 600 years, and it's still the truest thing I've ever felt." The stars overhead were still being born, new constellations forming as reality adjusted to its newly evolved species. Below, the valley was emptying as various factions departed, carrying with them the weight of change and the fragile hope of second chances. "Will it be okay?" Isla asked, her voice small against his chest. "The new way? Will vampires really change? Some will, some won't. But enough will try that maybe, in another 5,000 years, when the next Convergence children are born, the judgment will be easier." He kissed her forehead, right over the fading mark. "Because of you. Because 7 children saw the best and worst of us and decided we were worth saving." "We saw you," she corrected. "You and the others like you. The ones who still chose kindness." "Then I'll keep choosing it. Every day. For as long as this new mortality lasts." Thunder rumbled in the distance, natural thunder this time, heralding a spring storm. The twins dozed against him as he carried them toward the carriage, Celine and Mira falling into formation around them. Behind them, Cale stood alone, watching his children leave. The expression on his face was complex, grief and relief and something that might have been peace. He'd given up everything to create the Convergence children, broken every oath, destroyed his own beliefs. And in doing so, he'd saved them all. "My lord," Celine said quietly as they rode away, "what happens now?" The empathy changed, the mortality, the ability to create life. Everything that made us vampire is shifting. Some will fight it. There will be rebellions, factions who want to return to the old ways. Let them fight, Valencer replied, his arms still holding the sleeping twins. We've been granted evolution, not perfection. It'll take centuries for this to settle into a new normal. But we have centuries now, and we have these children as reminders of why the change was necessary. He looked down at Isla and Draven, their small faces peaceful in sleep. They judged us and found us wanting, but they also found us capable of becoming more. That's not a burden. It's a gift, the chance to be better than we were. The carriage rolled through landscapes still adjusting to new cosmic rules. Trees that glowed faintly, rivers that sang, air that tasted like possibility and change. In the east, the sun began to rise, and for the first time in 5,000 years, vampires could watch it without fear. The light still made them uncomfortable, but it no longer burned. Instead, it revealed them as they truly were, creatures of shadow learning to exist in the light. Valencer felt the dawn on his face and smiled. 600 years, 6 centuries of war and power, and carefully maintained control, all of it leading to this. 2 children asleep in his arms, a species being reborn, and the simple truth that choosing compassion over cruelty had saved more than any amount of strength ever could. Welcome to the new world, he whispered to the twins, to himself, to the universe that had judged and mercifully spared them. Let's see if we can do better this time. The sun climbed higher, painting the world in colors ancient vampires had forgotten existed, and in a carriage traveling toward a fortress that would become home to the children of Convergence, a king who'd learned to be a father watched the dawn and dared to hope, not for perfection, not for easy answers, but for the chance to prove that evolution was possible, that monsters could choose to become something more, that love, in the end, was stronger than the darkness that had defined them for so long. The storm broke overhead, rain falling like baptism, washing away the old world and welcoming the new. And in the mountains where it all began, where 2 infants were found crying in the rain, the gate stood open, not fortifications anymore, but a threshold, between what vampires were and what they could become, between power and compassion, between darkness and the fragile, beautiful light of second chances. The story would continue, struggles and failures and moments of transcendence, but it would continue as something new, something better, something worth the judgment that nearly erased them from existence. Because 7 children saw the truth, that even monsters can choose love, and sometimes that choice is enough to save the world.